here we are. This is Sex Love Psychedelics, and I'm your host, Dr. Kat, bringing you psychosexual conversations that will leave you intellectually turned on and hungry for more. Your program is around the tenderness, the touch, particularly for the chronically undertouched, and teaching them, how to, essentially regulate their nervous system to be with the subtleties, the nuances, and in their body. What about different types of touch or different types of sexuality? Or I'm thinking of kink and BDSM, given the past narratives or given the narratives around, Black Brute, or how do you speak to, I guess, what are your perspectives, or how do you speak to different types of ranges of sexuality in that way that isn't just tender?
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. Early on in this work, when I proposed it into the world, I didn't really know where I would find a niche. The kink community and BDSM community and sex workers were the first ones that were like, totally. I work with chronic touch folks all the time. I get it. Let's get at it. And the kink community specifically had so much more language and practice because they have the full range of touch. They've already examined on so many levels. And so for me, it was so good that this thing I'm talking about, platonic touch, in mainstream culture is a kink. It's like when I propose this to people on the streets, we'll say, outside of a workshop, outside of a container, it's like, what do you do? Like, how do you do that? Why? How? What? All these questions that never come up for me. I say I play football. I put on outfits when I was in high school. I run against each other and we smash each other as hard as we can. No one's like, why do you do that? It's not good for your brain. Like, no one ever interrogates my violent behaviors when I was an athlete. But when I come out with tender touch, there's all kind of interrogation.
Yeah.
I mean, am I a safe person? So the kink community just relax, like, oh, please. Oh, what? Oh, yeah, like, oh my goodness, yeah. So it's a way in which I early on was able to build some deep bonds and some deep conversations, but almost exclusively for the first kind of public years of the Cut Project. I say semi-public years. The level of consent, the level of conversation they're willing to have around how the rippling effects of touch on the body were profound. And one of the ways that it showed up really tenderly is that I was working with this amazing, it's kind of collective, but individual in this collective in the Bay Area. And she was talking about how she bundled grief, orgasm, pain into one experience. And that just tells you right there of like, that's where the kink community can live. Right. And I say that because there's a way in which the extreme that one perceives the kink community can be, and it has the whole spectrum. I have my own critiques of the whole community as far as like how they hold race and stuff like that. But I'm talking about the people that I've met that have been thinking really well, right? So no one's perfect here. But what they've been able to hold is so ungoogleable in the mainstream world, but so accessible in a group of folks that say you can be in grief, you can be in pain, and also in pleasure. That actually can coexist. And that parallels a lot of what happens in my work. And so there's a way in which I felt at home, but not just at home, but as a necessity to their thinking. I'm so grateful for, I've been in this community for 20 years, 30 years. I love them. Like, yes, because they have a seasoned community that's been pushing perceived edges, right? Perceived edges of humanity in a way that I needed. And so I just have been benefiting a lot from being able to bring in the grief into the orgasm, bring in the tears into sexuality, and bring in arousal and tears are not necessarily outside this sentence in this, like, and those two things really dismantle the Black Brute narrative. It really does. And so for me, I owe a lot of my current trajectory of work, my best comrades. I'll just put a dear friend of mine on the East Coast in DC named Dragon, who's this amazing workshop on the East Coast in nature. It's just the whole episode, you definitely should interview her at some point, around really what it means to find that grief, orgasm, and nature-based material working in the forest on tree material. We know about like ropes and stuff. Tree material is really huge in our Hurt story, and really able to handle all those narratives in our workshop I went to with her. And I just was like, I was a participant, a facilitator, and it's just really huge. So for me, I can go on for hours, but the punchline is that the language that has been used, the practice that have been practiced, and the thoughtfulness in the village of the Kink community has been tremendous resource and community to be built to help us find a ground in the cut material. Because I'll say real fast, it's a whole different topic, but we have the chronically undertouched. We also have the chronically overtouched. And the chronically overtouched oftentimes are violated. Oftentimes they are in feminine bodies, but Black men have also been overtouched and violence too, been touched outside of the consent. But because of those two things being negotiated, I think we have a lot we get to work on and heal in the Kink community when it talks about what does it mean for us to be in village and still track each other, not lose each other. When we drop into these darker areas of our identities, we're talking to this moment, shadow work, you might want to call it, but really at the end of the day, it's the lightest, brightest, most beautiful work I can see. So we can call it shadow work, but really it's the sun, it's the vitamin D we all been needing for a long time.
Well, that was fun. Thanks for tuning in, lovers. And if you want to experience more ecstasy and sexual liberation, head over to sexlovepsychedelics.com and learn about how you can join me for any one of my online or live events. And while you're there, grab my free guide on sex and psychedelics. Remember, this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please contact your healthcare provider and local law before pursuing any of the products or psychedelics discussed. And one final note here. I make this show specifically for you. If you're loving the show, then be sure to leave me a review in iTunes or Spotify to let me know. Happy to be here and happy to serve. I'll see you next time on Sex Love Psychedelics.